cactus and succulent growers, I'm Lynn. Welcome to Desert Plants of Avalon in the north of Ireland, and today's video I'm going to be repotting a very fierce and very sharp spined cactus plant, my Stetsonia Coryne, and in the famous words of MC Hammer, you can't touch this. So here is the awesome, gorgeous beaut of a brute, Stetsonia Coryne. And it is just an amazing, just look how long these spines are, guys. This is my finger and it's just wow. And like I say, I know you can't touch this, but I just can't resist. This is actually one I got a couple of months ago, so it's a relatively new addition, and I haven't repotted it yet. I got it in December from a supermarket called Sainsbury's here in Belfast, and I knew it needed repotting because one, it's very top heavy, the soil it's in looks absolutely horrible, and I wanted to wait till at least February now before I repotted it, so it's a bit of a pre-spring repotting. And once I've repotted it, I'm going to be keeping it dry for a month or two until it's April before I start to water again. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this amazing cactus, a little bit of care tips on it to help you if you're new to this stunner. Now this is actually the Stetsonia Coryne. It's actually a cactus from Argentina and Bolivia, and they can grow up to 30 feet in their natural habitats. They form many multi-branches, very gorgeous specimens. They're like full sun, so plenty of sunshine, so a very sunny window or sunny position in your greenhouse or polytunnel. And a very well draining cactus soil as well. I'm going to talk about the soil. I'm going to be repotting this one up because they like to dry out quickly in between waterings. They can be a wee bit more rot prone than certain types of cacti can be. So in the winter time, they like to be kept totally dry over the winter, ideally cool and dry. Now, these cacti are said to be relatively cold hardy and said to take down to -4°C if kept dry. But I've had this cactus before in the past, and sadly I lost it when I had it in the greenhouse at a minimum of about 5°C. So although they're meant to be cold hardy if kept dry, I've overwintered this one indoors here in my grow room, so I'd be on the safe side, especially in my climate here in Ireland. So if you've got a sort of damp, high humidity climate like typical UK and Ireland weather, I would probably overwinter it indoors to be on the safe side. And it's summertime, water every time the soil has totally dried out in the pots. As I say, very well draining cactus soil is needed, and only water when the soil is totally dried out from the spring right up until sort of late summer. And fertilise roughly about once every 6 weeks. I like to use a tomato feed with my cacti. I use it at a very weak strength to encourage more blooming due to the high potash. And propagation is from seed and cuttings. I've never had an attempt to grow these from seed or take cuttings of these yet, but that's the propagation methods. And they do have to be quite large before they will flower. Flowers are lovely, beautiful white flowers on these, but they usually have to be at least 2 foot high or taller before they will flower. Hopefully I'll see this flower one day in the future. Now with the soil mix, as I mentioned, well draining soil, I've used a soil mix here of my favourite sort of cactus mixture that I make myself, of 3 equal parts of loam soil, LOAM. In this case I'm using John Ennis No. 2, mixed with horticultural grit and horticultural sharp sand. I've used it roughly at 3 equal parts and given it all a good mix around, so it's very well draining. I'm also using dry soil as well and not wet soil, and this is important especially if you're repotting plants at this time of year, sort of winter, late winter time. Once I repot, I also keep the cactus dry for a couple of, even if I was repotting in the spring and summer, I would still keep the cactus dry for at least 10 days to 2 weeks to let any roots settle. But as it is still winter now, I won't be watering this plant anyway until the April time. So that's a little bit about the care tips on this awesome cactus. And now it's time to get repotting. I've got the next size pot up there. As you can see, very small pot. So I'm not going too large because repotting a cactus into too large of a pot can also encourage things like root rot and other problems to form. So literally just a pot, just a bit size, bit bigger, just to let it to sort of grow into a pot a little bit bigger than the last one. Now obviously when it comes to handling something as spiny as this, I would recommend that you protect your hands. So I'm going to be using this to handle it when I turn it over. And I'm somebody who doesn't like to wear gloves, because I find gloves absolutely useless when you're repotting spiny cacti. But you do need to protect your hands. Sometimes I'll use sheets of newspaper or card, or something to protect my hands when I'm repotting something very spiny like this. But this one it's quite small, so I'm just literally going to turn it on its side like that. This plastic container here is not going to affect my hands whatsoever. And as you can see there, I'll just show you, roots already coming through. So let's say I haven't got this out of the pot since I got it, so I don't know what the state of it's going to be like with the root system or anything like that. So I'm going to just very gently squeeze the pot. Ta-da! Come out really well, as you can see. Great. Just it's a great root system there. And it looks quite loose as well, the soil on the root, so it's not root bound. If this was very root bound, it was just a mass of roots, I'd probably very gently, carefully tease the roots off. But this is quite loose on here. The soil actually isn't too bad either. Normally they pot them up in pure peat, but this feels quite, definitely not the normal peat. It seems quite, I'm not quite sure, but it's not bad stuff anyway. So I'm going to be very careful with this and just very gently place it into the pot with the soil on. I'm just going to leave it and then water it. Now, normally I would try and get as much of the old soil off. What I'm going to do though is just very gently, I'm not going to touch the bottom of the cactus because I don't want to. I'm just going to leave it as it is, but I'm just going to remove some of this old soil on here. I use a bit of a blunt end, or one of these little toothpicks. I take the sharp bit off, and then this is a toothpick for the toothpick cactus. Just very gently remove some of the old soil carefully here, but I don't want to take too much off because I think it could damage it, and it's quite loose anyway, as in it's not tightly root bound, but I always just like to remove a bit of the old soil. It just means by doing this, the cactus is going to take to the new soil a bit better, because it's a different soil mix to what I would use. This, I don't know if it is peat, but it doesn't feel bad. Normally they use the peat where it's just like cardboard, but this isn't too bad. So just very carefully loosen that up. Now I've removed some of the older soil up at the top and it's loosened up there, but as I say, I don't want to damage that. This cactus can be a wee bit rot prone, so I am going to be very careful with that. That's enough soil I've removed off there. As I say, if it was very compacted and very root, I'm going to have to loosen it up more, but I'm going to leave that. So here we go, putting the soil in the bottom here. And very carefully, this is where I'm going to have to I just lift this up so you can see what I'm doing a bit more there. I have to use this again just to pick up this very spiny cactus. Gently placing it in, like so. Placing it, making sure it's in the centre, which it is. Now, although this is very spiny, I can actually very carefully touch it now with the edges of the spines, and that's in quite well. And I can actually hold it like that, and then I'm going to be making sure that I get all the soil all around the edges and it goes all around it here evenly. That's it. That was an awesome cactus. It's important that you use dry soil and not use wet. People often say, is it okay if I'm using cactus soil that's slightly damp? Well, there's a bit different between moist cactus soil and very slightly moist and slightly damp than wet soil. If it's very slightly damp or moist, not really a problem, especially if it's spring and summer. But I always like to use dry and then let the plant acclimatise. And as I say, even if this was summer, I wouldn't be watering it anyway for a couple of weeks. I haven't really, as you can see, I've not disturbed the roots hardly at all, so there'll be no problem there anyway. Gently tap so the soil goes down the sides. And by potting up now as well, it might say it's a bit too early to start repotting cacti, but I'm making a start on repotting some of my cacti that are here that in my grow room and office because they've been overwintered indoors. My grow room is kept quite warm as well. I've got tons in the polytunnel I want to be repotting, but because it can go very cold now, we've had a bit of a cold spell. 1 minute it goes mild, then cold again. Typical February temperatures. So I'm not going to make a start on repotting any of the cacti in the polytunnel, probably until March time anyway. But I can certainly make a start on repotting all the cacti that's in my office. Gives them a bit of a head start for the spring. So there we go, one very happy Stetsonia Coryne, and what a beauty. So thank you for watching, everybody, and if you haven't done already, then don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook at Desert Plants of Avalon, and check out my website for lots of blogs on there, desertplantsofavalon.com. I want to wish you all a fantastic, fierce and ferocious and amazing cactus powered day. Bye. Thank you for repotting me.